What makes or breaks a great song? Vocals! So, watch on to find out how to make and not break your great song. If you didn't check out the previous videos, I'll just give you a little spin. So we've been working on this song, which is in E Dorian. So that's a minor mode. And this is what we have. And then you'll see, like right here, this is our vocal melody, which we have composed. When you compose a vocal melody, you always compose it without lyrics. You write the melody, and you say what you want to say musically, and then you write the lyrics to say exactly the same thing in words. On that note, that's another really important thing, which happens all the time in pop music. Music is communicating through sound, right? So what happens is your melody, the notes in your melody are saying something, and this is why, if you understand music theory, you're always going to say exactly what you want to say. If you don't understand music theory, you're still saying something. It's like you just don't know what it is. And then what happens is people come along and slap lyrics to that melody, or sometimes they just kind of do it all in one go, using their ear. And anyway, the result is that the lyrics and the melody are actually saying two different things. So you're having contrasting messages, which is really bad, because the words can be saying something, and then the music, the actual melody that those words are being sung to, that melody is making you feel something that is totally inappropriate for those words. And that pretty much happens all the time in popular music, because people are making these melodies by ear, so they don't really know what the actual melody is saying to people and what the melody is making people feel. So I always encourage my students to write the melody first, say what you want to say through the music, and then come afterwards and carefully write the lyrics to exactly match up with the message that the melody is making your listener feel. And because really it is so powerful when the lyrics and the melody totally match up and say the same thing. Okay, now shut up. And he's in the corner. That's the naughty corner. Alright, so here we go. You're gonna hear a little kind of run through the chord progression over here, and then the piano is going to be playing the vocal melody over here. So always composing on the piano, especially for vocals. So the piano test, as I say, if it sounds good on a piano, it's going to sound good on anything. Here we go. Alright, so, and you'll see I've got the backing vocals muted over here. That whole melody is harmonized as well, using Counterpoint, but we're not going to get to that today. First things first, we need our great lead vocal line. Okay, so it's I know it's kind of weird when you first start composing vocal lines on a piano, but you get used to it real quick, and it also really helps to actually sing the melody as you're going through. So just you can use da da da, la la la, whatever you want. Sometimes you can kind of like make up sounds, just you know, using various syllables that kind of sound like they could be words, whatever you want, but it really does help to sing along. Okay, so just to put that in context, let's have a quick little sing song through here. Alright, here we go. So just on da na na. Da na na na, da na na na, da 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 na na na, da na na na, da na na na, da 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 na na. So as soon as you start singing it, you can also feel how different it is with all those non-harmonic notes, because your ear and your voice are going to protest, because singing a note that's not in the chord is it's very difficult, and it sounds very different to what we're used to hearing, because we don't hear much of it in most music being made today. So alright, let's get in. I was trying to decide if I should start from scratch or if I should just show you the finished vocal line and talk through it. So I thought this time around I'm just actually going to show you the final version, and then we're going to explain every single note. Once again, if a note doesn't have a reason for being there, then why is it there? So every single one of these notes is doing something. It's telling a part of the musical story that we wanted to tell. Okay, so let's get into it. First things first, you'll notice, as always, if you've watched the other videos, you already know this, but these guys on the bottom down here, so all of these dark notes down here, these are muted. What they are is just the root notes of every chord. So this is our chord progression here. We've got E minor, B minor, G major, A major, and again. So that's all A major, and then up to D major. And then here, this is actually where the chord progression starts again, so it loops around. So what that means is, once again, this is quite rare in most pop music, because there's so much repetition. As people have got more and more hungry for this kind of this hook, this kind of like hook mentality, where it's like in the food industry when they just started putting more and more refined sugar in everything, and everything's more and more processed, and you know, MSG, and it's just you take like one taste of it and you're like addicted for life, but it's gonna kill you. It's really bad. So the way pop music is being written with this like absolute relentless pursuit of hooks, what it means is that it's just everything, all the melodies are getting shorter and simpler, and you end up with not mentioning any names, but you end up with songs where the chorus is like a one syllable word sung on one note, just like repeated over and over. And it's like, what happens is, you know, people get into that, and that's like the hit, you know, the smash hit culture, you know, where everyone is obsessed with a song and they love it and they listen to it on repeat, and then next week they hate it, they can't stand it anymore because there's no substance there, there's no depth, there's nothing. It's just what I call sonic sugar. It's you know, it's fun while you're consuming it, and then afterwards you feel sick and you don't want to do that again. Except unfortunately in pop music they go on to the next hit, and then it starts all over again. So when you listen to music with depth, you know, what music that is being thoughtfully composed, it's timeless. It, you know, in fact, often the more you listen to it, the more you love it. And you'll listen to something, you know, 10 years, 20 years after you discovered it, and you're still loving it. Okay? And that's because it was composed with artistic intentions, not cramming as much sonic sugar and MSG into it as possible, you know, to make it addictive for a week or two and then makes you sick. So what I was saying was, what most pop music doesn't do, we have this vocal line that I've highlighted here. So this is going over our chord progression, and then most of the time when the chord progression starts again, when it loops around, you just sing the same thing. And what we've done here is we've actually created a variation, and we've done it very carefully to make use of motifs that you hear in the first one. So when it does go on to the second melody over here, it is sounding fresh but also familiar, and to me that's that kind of that magic crossover, where you can make something that is creative and artistic but also popular, you know. So we're bringing in elements here that were in the first one, so there is a sense of structure and you know, cohesiveness to the whole thing, which is what makes that nice, warm, fuzzy, familiar feeling. But it's not just completely repeating it. You know, we've very thoughtfully created a variation. So that's what we've got. So we've got the same chord progression here, and here, just looping around, and we've got two melodies over it. And you can really think of this as actually extending the lifespan of the melody, because, you know, if the melody was just the first half here, then, you know, it's going to last so long. But having the melody that's essentially that, right, the melody is twice as long, which means its longevity is twice as long as well. And a cool side effect of that is that you end up making the chord progression, which actually does loop here and here, you end up making the chord progression also sound like it's actually twice as long, even though it's not. But the ear will perceive it like that because the melody is changing. So, okay, let's get into it. So, whenever you start writing a vocal melody, you want to think about the first note a great deal, because it's like in a film, you know, when you watch the opening scene, you can the opening scene could start, you know, with I don't know, someone like running down the road, and a car chasing them, and it's like tense, and you like straight in, like what is, it's kind of, it's moving you into and forwards through the story. On the other hand, it could start with a nice scenic shot of like some beautiful rolling hills and lakes, and and that's kind of just easing you into the surroundings. And so the opening scene is very important in terms of how the listener emotionally connects as you first come into your melody. So singing a harmonic note is gonna give a sense of strength, and the downside of that is that it's going to be somewhat predictable, obviously. And on the other hand, if you go in with a non-harmonic note, it's creating that tension, and it's kind of pulling you in to want to know what happens next. And the downside of a non-harmonic note starting you off is obviously that it is a bit weaker, not weaker in a bad way, weaker in a interesting way, because it's not what the ear was expecting. And that's exactly what we did here. So the first chord, we're in E Dorian, just a reminder, the first chord was E minor. So that's our E right down here. And we wanted to come in on the 2, which is F sharp. The reason we wanted to start on the 2 is because 2s always have a really floaty sound to them, because they're obviously in between the 1 and the 3. So you've got the 1, 3, 5, and then the 2's right in there. And most importantly, the 2 is just above the 1, like the root, right? So it kind of it gives this feeling of it's like almost levitating above the root, but not quite up to the 3, or in this case, because we're in a minor, it's the flat 3, right, which is the G. So we wanted to come in on the 2, because the vibe of this section is really just super kind of chilled and beautiful, and also a little bit moody, because we've got like all of these, like this whole thing is minor, right? We've got E minor to B minor. So it was something that we had a decision to make. We could with the vocals, we could emphasize the minorness of the E, of the root triad, or we could kind of float around it. So obviously we decided to avoid emphasizing the sadness and go for a more subtle beginning to our melody. Once you've decided on the note that you want to start on, so the kind of opening scene of your melody, the next thing is the timing. Where do you want it? So obviously, we're starting with our E minor on the first beat. So the F sharp, we could have had it anywhere. It could have started straight away, or there. We could have come in over there. Why did we come in here? The reason we came in there is because we also wanted it to start with syncopation, and almost kind of give it this feeling of being so kind of chill that it was almost like late to the party, right? So instead of, because starting a melody on the first beat says a lot. It's like, hello, I am here to be the melody on time, and I want your attention now. Starting later, and especially syncopated, right? So syncopating is accenting the offbeat. So starting here, it just kind of like came in the side door to the party a little bit late. It makes it really subtle. So we were kind of going for all kinds of subtleness to start this melody, and then we also thought we were just going to go up to the flat 3 really quickly, just to acknowledge that sadness, because sometimes if you don't acknowledge it by just touching on the flat 3 for a moment, that is telling the musical story that you're trying to avoid it. So we're not avoiding the sadness, we're just not emphasizing it. So just a quick acknowledgement, and then back to our chilled out, nice floaty 2 over there, the F sharp. So have a listen to this. Okay, so obviously the next thing you notice is this huge interval from the F sharp up to D. So that is actually going up a 6th. So remember, on this note, the melody checklist, check that out in the songwriting and producing PDF, because it's got literally every hack you need to write a great melody every time. So, and some of them we're covering here. This is one of them. Using both small and big intervals is what's going to give you one of the things that's going to result in a great melody, because once again, a lot of pop music now has very small intervals. The reason is because they want everyone to be able to sing along, because if people can sing along with the song, they get it stuck in their head, they're going to stream it more, they might buy it, they're going to want more and more of that song. If they can't sing it, it's much more challenging, and maybe they're not going to want to listen to it all the time because it's a bit difficult to sing. So that is unfortunately why a lot of pop music melodies have really been dumbed down. So they don't use these really big intervals because they are difficult to sing, and if people struggle to sing them, they may not get the song stuck in their head. So which obviously results in, once again, the songs all sound the same because everyone's doing the same thing. We are brave, and you're brave, which is why you're watching this. So we love big intervals because they add huge amounts of drama and energy and vitality to our melodies. So this little phrase over here really sums up the balance that you want to create in your melody with small intervals and big intervals. So you can see these over here are moving a semitone up and a semitone down. Semitone movements are always really interesting because if you think about all the modes, there's only 2 places where you ever get one semitone. Most of the time we're used to hearing 2 semitones because there's just more of the 2 semitone interval in all scales and modes. So that is something that I always look for. Is there somewhere I could do a little semitone movement? And you'll see they're everywhere here. There, we got here, we got here, and more. So those semitones sound more unusual to the ear, because the ear is used to hearing tones, right? So a tone is 2 semitones. So we got a little interval here, and then this big one up to here. So just when you kind of think it's like, you know, okay, and then it's whoa, it like soars up a sixth up to this D. The D is a flat 7 over the E. Okay, so that is what we did for the first chord. Another really good hack for making strong melodies is to do things to link the chords, because every time the chord changes, it actually creates just a very brief moment of weakness. So and this is, you know, this is part of Counterpoint, which is that I mentioned there's a Counterpoint hack in that songwriting PDF. So if you do want to go more into that, check it out. I won't be doing it here because it's a little bit more advanced. So but having said that, the concept is very simple. So super simple concept, but it takes a bit of practice to use, which is why I've got that hack for you if you want to check that out. So the chord is moving here. So this little moment of weakness, what we're doing to strengthen that is we're putting a note right over there that we're holding. So as we're singing and holding a note, the chord changes underneath. So it's kind of like little what do they call it? Sleight of hand. You know, you kind of like, listen up here, look up here, look up here. So we're singing this note, and the attention is on that really high note, right? Because firstly, it's a high note, and secondly, because we're holding it, and then underneath the chord changes, and no one notices because the attention was up here. So check that out. Okay, and then the other cool thing about holding notes as chords change is, other than the fact that it strengthens that chord change, it also, the note becomes 2 notes. So I know that sounds weird. 1 note becomes 2 notes. But what happens is right here, where the chords change, what happens when the chords change, the whole world kind of shifts around that 1 note that stays the same. So what happens is the ear reorientates based on the new root of the new chord, because your ear is always hearing every note in the melody, in harmony, everything. It's always hearing that in context to whatever the root is at that moment. So in other words, when this note, the D, your ear is hearing that as a flat 7, but then what happens is the chords change to B minor, and suddenly this note, which is D, right, that becomes a flat 3 over B minor. So it's really cool because you can have 1 note, and by holding it over a chord change, you actually get 2 different emotions. 1 emotion on the first chord, and then when the chord changes, you get a different emotion. So really cool magic trick to strengthen chords and to get 2 emotions out of 1 note. Alright, so now we wanted to use that same kind of semitone. Basically, from doing this, you know, we were like, okay, that's a motif. Always motif hunting. Remember, anything that happens where you're like, oh, I could reuse that somewhere else in a different way to create that structure and cohesiveness to the melody. So a motif is, just to recap, it's a short musical idea. And that's exactly what we wanted to do here. We're like, oh, you know, this is the flat 3, so we could go down to the 2 over B, right? Gives that floaty sound again. And then we wanted to go back to the flat 3 because that note that became the flat 3 when the chord changed to B, that was really pulling on the heartstrings. There was a high note, it turned into like the flat 3, which is the sad note. And you know, we were like, okay, well, we don't want to totally milk it, like by basically having, you know, this note go all the way there. So we did, you know, we did want to have a brief moment. So we had a little phrase, but then we kind of went off it and then up to it again. So this creates tension, the 2, and then we resolve it up to the flat 3. And just another thing I said, phrase. Phrase, it's another term. Phrase is, you can kind of think of it like a, you know, a little sentence. So we've got actually no, sorry, I'll take that back. The melody. So this would be like the sentence. That would be the first sentence. That would be the second sentence. So this is a portion of that sentence, and this little breath here, that's a comma. That's a musical comma. So, and this is the wonderful thing about writing vocal lines. We have to breathe. You can't just sing this whole thing, right? So as soon as you start writing a vocal line, suddenly what happens is you are forced to start thinking about phrasing. Phrasing is something that we should use for all melodies. So if you go back and look at the bass line that we did, even though it's on a bass, and you know the bass doesn't need to breathe, the bass can play continuous notes all the time, we still made use of phrasing, because phrasing actually allows the music to breathe. So it's way more important than just, you know, us needing a breath to sing the next part of the melody. It's about giving the music space to breathe. And vocals is the one place where we're forced to think about that, because we also need to breathe. So there you go, phrasing. Use it in all your melodies, even on synths and guitars and things that don't need to breathe. Okay, so we have the flat 3 to flat 3, and then we actually originally what we had, I think this guy was going all the way to there, and then we wanted to go down to here, but we had a D down to an A. Okay, and as I've already gone on about in the bassline video, and once again, check out the melody checklist, because this is a huge thing, right? In making great melodies. We had the interval from D down to A of a perfect fourth, and as you know by now, if you've been watching these, perfect intervals are they vibrate too perfectly. I know it sounds weird, but too perfectly means that they sound too similar. So whenever you have a melodic movement, so from that note to that note, whenever you have a melodic movement of a perfect fourth or perfect fifth, you want to break it up so you get a more colorful interval, because I don't imagine you want any boring intervals in your melody. So that's what we do, and that is how we ended up with this little guy down here. And as I've said before, every time you have a perfect fourth or perfect fifth and you break it up with a note in between, what that does is it creates this wonderful, lively and spontaneous moment in the melody, that, like, this little detour that you never would have taken if it wasn't for that perfect fourth or perfect fifth. So I always really celebrate when we have those intervals. It's a moment to do something I wouldn't have done otherwise. So from the D, which is the flat 3, we went all the way down to the F sharp. So we actually went down a sixth again. So this is that interval is the same interval that we did over here, right? Except this time we're going down. and the F sharp is actually the 5 over B, so that's a harmonic note. So really strong interval, and then the chord changes and we move up to an A, and once again you can see the chord, the B to the G, so it's B minor down to the G major, chords are moving down, and we counter that, right? So this is that counterpoint. I'm just kind of planting these seeds. This is contrary motion, so we're moving in opposite directions, and what that does is it creates independence. And once again, it's like most pop music, it's like everything's just copying everything else, you know. So the vocal line is copying the bass line, and you know it. So you end up with very thin sounding music. When you create independence by going in different directions, you create depth and you create layers. So that's what we did here. We went up to the A, and the A over the G, you can already hear that. It's like, that is our floaty friend. That is a 2 again. So once again, we're kind of using that motif that we had in the beginning, coming in on that floatiness, and that's all we did over the G, is just that 2. And then you'll see here, musical comma, little breath, and then we carry on over here, and all of this is over the A major. So you'll see we did another big drop here. There's a breath here, so you're not hearing it exactly the same way as you're hearing this. This was a flowing note, no breath, and this was like, you know, these big intervals with no breath. So this one we've got a little breath, but then we start again lower. So it's kind of a nice refreshing change to like the kind of dropping of those big intervals. So once again the chords go up and we come down. We came down to a C sharp, which is the 3, the major 3 over A. So we hit that happy note, which is, that was really important to us, because this the A major chord, if you didn't watch the chords video for this chord progression, check that out. But the A major chord is the 4th chord in Dorian, and in Dorian modes, all Dorian modes, you always want to make sure you emphasize the 4th chord, or at least play the 4th chord, because that 4th chord is what makes it different to just like, you know, the natural minor scale. Because the 4th chord, our ears are, and in pop music, it's like that 4th chord in a minor key is always minor. So we're so used to hearing that as minor, suddenly we hear it as major, and it's like, whoa, what is that? It sounds really bright. It's that the cloud with the silver lining, right? So this note here is really giving us that, like that note literally on its own is giving us that silver lining. So we wanted to start on that. We still kept it syncopated, so we had a little breath, came in syncopated, but this time it's obviously going to sound much brighter. Semitone motif again, and then jumping up from the D. This is a huge interval. This is D all the way up to C sharp, so that's 11 semitones, so that's a major 7th. And the C sharp here is that same guy. It's the major 3rd, except this time it's an octave higher. And we really wanted to get up to that because of these, right? So these 2 notes here, that was the flat 3, the minor 3rd, the sad note. So we've got sad notes there, and then boom, super high happy note. So it sounds amazing when it gets to that. I'll just play it up to there. Okay, so as soon as it hits, I was like, whoa, it's super bright, super posy vibes, as they say. All right, and then we came down. Soon as we hit the high 3, we didn't want to milk it though, right? Because we still wanted to kind of stay with our subtle approach. So we came down to the 1, so the A, and then we dropped down to the F sharp, and the reason we did that actually was, I think originally we were kind of thinking of like this, you know, just kind of having like a little descending line, and then we were like, you know, A, G, F sharp. Whenever you have like too much kind of, you know, just going up or down through the scale, sometimes it, and once again pop music is full of this, it sounds like you're literally like practicing singing your scales, you know. So every now and then I'll have 3 notes, like 3 consecutive notes in a row of a scale, but I try to, or I always avoid that unless the song absolutely demands it. If that's what it wants, fine, but I will always avoid that unless it is exactly what is needed, and it definitely wasn't what was needed here. So we just kind of spiced it up with this little extra note here, which is a 6 over the A, so that is the F sharp, and then up to the G, which is the flat 7 over A. And once again, check this out, that little trick, same trick as we did up here, except this time just half the amount, half the time. So this G over the A is a flat 7, and then the chord moves to D, and the G becomes the 4th. Okay, and the cool thing about 4ths, as you know, non-harmonic notes, and 4s always want to fall into the 3, because the 3 is the note that makes a chord major or minor, and a scale and a mode. So that 3rd note is always the one that makes it major or minor. That's what determines major or minor. It's our magic note, right? That's the note with the most emotion. So every time you have a 4, it's like just above it, right? So that 4 always wants to come down to the 3. And you know what? We had done a whole bunch here and asked a lot of our listeners. So here we were like, you know what? Yeah, absolutely. We are going to give you exactly what you want. We're not going to give it to you exactly where you're expecting. So we did it on a syncopated note here, on a little offbeat. But we gave the nice major 3, so that F sharp over D. Okay, so let's have a listen to our first melody. So this here. Okay, so you can hear it just ends on like such a positive note. Literally, the major 3rd. Okay, and then this was also really important for us. Like finishing and starting on the same note makes it like super subtle, and you can hear that it just kind of glides into the next melody. Okay, totally just picks up where you left off. So here you'll see we did exactly the same thing. Okay, we got that same motif, except suddenly we don't shoot up to the high note there. We just keep the low one. The reason for this is because you always kind of, you know, with your big intervals, you're thinking of those peaks and those climaxes, and then the moments where you want the kind of subtlety to contrast. So we wanted to head up to like a high note, and then have it fall down, which is what we ended up doing here. But we were kind of thinking, well, if we go up to there, it's like we just gave the story away. Have a listen, I'll show you what I mean. This note has no impact whatsoever, because this note stole all the glory, right? So we were like, no way. You go down there, so this note's going to be really subtle, and now listen to how powerful this high note is over here. Check this out. Okay, so that's going to just sound incredible. And once again, you'll see we did that trick of holding a note as the chords change. So this F sharp is the 2 over the E minor, and then the chord changes to B minor, and the F sharp is the 5. So really strong. Not the most interesting note because, you know, it's a harmonic note, and the only interesting harmonic note is obviously the 3. That's the magic note. But the 1 and the 5, it's like, you know, they're strong because they blend into the chord, but that's also the downside, is that you know, that's exactly what you're expecting. Predictable. So this note just kind of slides into the next chord, and that's fine because that's exactly what we wanted. We want it to be nice and subtle. So this one, bing, really pops out. And that note, the high D, that is the minor 3 over the B minor. So that flat 3, that's our pulling the heartstrings note. Really, really lovely. And coming in on that that offbeat again. And then we did the opposite. You'll notice this little phrase here. We went 2 up to the flat 3, and here we're going flat 3 down to the 2, because we wanted to like hit that high note and then fall, right? So we've got the 2 over there, and then we fell down to the flat 7. So same thing. We could have gone to the root, but look at this. It's like, then it sounds like you're just singing through the scale, right? So we wanted to have a little bit of a big interval here. So from the C sharp down to an A. So that was the melodic interval of a third. And then, once again, check this out. Chord change, and we're singing the same note. So this time, because of the kind of sequence that we'd already set up in the first part of the melody, where it goes like that, short note and then long note, we wanted to do the same thing here. So we just sung the same note twice, short, long. So this kind of matches up to this. So you can hear. Okay, so same rhythm, some of the same notes, different order, but it definitely has that familiarity. So familiar, but also fresh. That's that magic. Okay, and then, so this note is obviously the same note that we had the first time around. So over the G, we've got the A, the 2, giving us that floaty sound. We've got a little musical comma over here, ending our phrase, so we take a breath. These guys here, exactly the same as here. So we went, so we're over the A major chord now. That is a 3, and then semitone up to the 4. And then this time though, instead of hitting that same high major 3, because that would have been too much of a good thing. Okay, so that's like, you know, I always say it's like too much chocolate, you know, so it could be the most amazing, organic, vegan, wonderfully dark chocolate. Doesn't matter, eat too much of it and you feel sick. So same thing, it's like you don't want to overuse the really, really good stuff, right? So we've got that high major 3 here, in the first melody. So this time we were like, let's go to that floaty note, the floaty 2, right? And that also kind of ties into that theme that we've got going through of the floaty 2s. So over the A, we had starting with the rest, a break over there for the breath, and then we've got 3, 4, and then up to that high 2. So you still get that soaring, but this time it's it's kind of the soaring into the clouds, you know, not dark clouds, soaring into light fluffy clouds, but not the super happy major third. And obviously from here we've got a D up to a B. So this interval is that big sixth interval again, you know, which we've used in various places, like right at the beginning of the melody. So that's a nice little familiar aspect again. And then we fall to the 1 after that 2, and that's also cool because like I said, 2s always want to fall to 1s. So they, you know, I mean, you could take a 2 up to a 3 because obviously the third's a magic note. But having said that, 2s will always want to fall to a 1 as their default, because obviously the root, the 1, is the, you know, the strongest note of any key. So we've made people really kind of, you know, we've challenged their ears, and we're like, okay, we're going to give you what you want. Once again, not exactly when you want it. We're going to do it on a syncopated note here. So 2, 1, and then we actually kind of did this little thing here. We did the same thing down to that F sharp and G. We did that same thing here, F sharp and G. So the F sharp is the major sixth over the A major chord. So we've got a 6, and then that's into that flat 7 again, the G. And then you'll notice that same trick. We're holding the note as the chord changes to strengthen it. And that G becomes, over the next chord, the D major, it becomes the 4. Okay, so it's the same thing as we did there, except the 4, the first time around, we fell to that 3, right? We kind of gave them what they wanted. And the listener is definitely expecting that again, right? Because 4s always want to fall to 3s, except this time we take that 4 up to a 5. Okay, so that's A. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we didn't want to milk that happy major 3 note over here, but we did want to conclude our melody with a nice strong harmonic note, and the 5 was right next to the 4. So we're like, that's a really nice kind of, it actually like lifts a little bit at the end, literally, like the melody goes up when you're expecting it to fall to that major 3. And it sounds like this. So it's that cool kind of, you know, trick where the listener wants a harmonic note, so you give them a harmonic note, but you don't give them the one that they were expecting. So it does sound concluding and satisfying, but it's also not what they were expecting. I really like doing that kind of thing. Always in your melodies, make sure your last note goes back around to the first note, and you don't have a perfect 4th or perfect 5th. So the A over here, we go around to F sharp down there. So that is that's great. It's a 3rd down, minor 3rd down. So yeah, that is awesome. We have a great melody. Every single interval is strong. We've got motifs. We've got harmonic notes, non-harmonic notes, lots of non-harmonic notes. We've got syncopation to lively up the energy, the rhythm. We've got small intervals, big intervals. It's, yeah, everything you can want in a great melody. When you listen to it, it's a little bit difficult to sing at first, which is why you wouldn't find these kinds of melodies in pop music. But you're not going to get sick of this melody next week. You know, this is a timeless melody. And on that note, one more time through, and then we are done. Here we go. So there you have it. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, if you're feeling inspired and empowered, which I hope you are, please click subscribe so we can do it all again next week. And obviously, you know, this week your hack work is to compose a great vocal melody for the chord progression, which you have hopefully done along with us as we've been doing this song 1. So you should have a chord progression now, great chord progression, great bass line, great riff, linking the bass into the chords and then into the vocal melody, which is what you're going to be adding this week. So remember, check out the melody checklist and the songwriting and producing PDF on our website. And if you need any help with the basics, download the free ebook 12 Music Theory Hacks to Learn Scales and Chords, and between that and these videos you will be good to go with your writing of great songs. So I will see you next week on Theory Thursday, and thanks again. Check out our website revolutionharmony.com for those books. Alright, goodbye.